Good morning and welcome to Croydon. It's time to be honest. From the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown that ensued, there was a lot of stockpiling took place. Have you got a mountain of toilet rolls, or anything else for that matter, that you prepared for the lockdown, that you got just in case you needed? Were you prepared? Everything seems to have changed, so how can we prepare? When we first saw a region in northern Italy go into lockdown, did we think it'll be the UK next? Let's get ready. Or did we just ignore it? To be honest, I'm not sure we can fully prepare for the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone keeps saying that the old normal has gone and a new normal is coming, that we're living in a time of change. And there's lots of impacts of change. There's a physical impact, an emotional, and yes, a spiritual impact. And for some people, they've seen their lives turned upside down in an instant with change. Others, it's been little more than mildly inconvenienced. Yet, in change, in times of change, in times of turmoil even, we can find Jesus, who leads us into change times.
Be still for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Reverence and fear. In him no sin is found. We stand on holy ground. Be still for the presence of the Lord. The Holy One is here.
Everything has changed. The COVID-19 pandemic seems to have turned everything upside down. And yet, I'm not entirely sure that living in a changed or a changing world is a new thing. Yes, changes come fast, but I think change is inevitable. Change is a process. It comes to all of us whether we prepare for it or not. Our lives have been in a constant state of transition since the moment we were born. Life always moves forward. The clock always ticks. Nothing ever remains the same. You move forward and we leave the past behind. There's no standing still because time moves forward. To a greater or lesser extent, we are continually being changed, whether suddenly or gradually, into a new, into a different, into an unexpected and untried person for who we are. And everything in this world is liable to change. In fact, it has been said that the only constant thing in life is change. Jesus referred to this, I think, when he spoke in Matthew 6 verse 34, saying, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." I paraphrase and say each day has enough change of its own. Jesus told us over and over again in the Bible not to worry. Not to worry about natural things, about clothes, about food, about shelter. Don't be anxious. Don't be worried. Don't be troubled. The challenge is to live today. To live in the now. In our thoughts, we're often somewhere else. But to live in the presence. And we do this as followers of Jesus by practicing God's presence in every moment of every day. Rejoice in the Lord. And the psalmist says, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Change is here to stay. As I was getting ready to move into my appointment here as the Corps officer at Croydon Citadel, I was reminded of a verse that has stuck with me throughout all my time that I've been here. And it says this, and it's taken from Romans chapter 12. "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is good, his pleasing and perfect will." Paul uses 3 identifying adjectives to describe the will, the purpose of God, the change of God. It is good. That's the first thing he says. Regardless of what it might ask of us, we find that God's purposes are good. It is pleasing. Pleasing in the sense of being involved in the purpose of God, of being involved in something we're willing to do. As we move through this life, God is in the business of maturing us, of changing us. And that's pleasing. And it is perfect. Nothing I can do can add to God's plan and improve it. But when we're involved in the purpose of God, he sees the end of the matter even before we've begun. Change and innovation are integral components of both biological and spiritual growth. Perhaps the Bible brings more focus on process than on product, because all believers are in the process of becoming the people God meant us to be. Without change, growth is impossible. Change is here to stay. Change is part of God's plan for us. For you, it may be hard. Change is tough enough when it's at a reasonable pace. And as we see in these days, society, nations, communities, families, you and I, we're in a wild vortex of change. It's breakneck speed. And if we're going to survive, if we're going to thrive as children of God, as a church that honours and glorifies God, well, change of this magnitude must be deeply rooted in a solid core of values. More, it demands spiritual depth and maturity. Perhaps for those of you who belong to Croydon Citadel, or for you anyway, here's the dynamic of change we're challenged by. Change of this magnitude must be deeply rooted in a solid core of values. It demands spiritual depth and maturity. Do you want to change? That's the question. Do you want to mature? John 5 has the tale of a man who was paralysed, and he'd sat by the side of a pool that was reputed to heal people, and he'd sat there for years and years, for 38 years in actual fact. And Jesus came along and he asked him a mad question. In verse 6 of John chapter 5, do you want to get well? What kind of question is that? The man at the pool needs to change desperately. Do you want to get well? Change is here to stay. What about you? A very similar question. Do you want to get well? Do you want to change? We change in our health, physically, emotionally and spiritually, in our relationships, in our marriages, in our family lives, in our burden for those we love. Do you want to change in your pace of life, with the stress of life? And here's the rub today. Do you want to change? COVID-19 actually has given us the opportunity. The lockdown has slowed life down a little for us. Do you want to change from lacking purpose and significance? If we keep on doing the same thing, if we keep on doing what we've been doing, we'll get the same results. If you come to work on a day-by-day basis and do the same thing, you'll get the same outputs. If your family life is pretty much the same as you learned growing up, you'll have a very similar family. If your relationship with God and the church has the same priority as ever it's had, then it's unlikely to grow spiritually. Life is throwing change at you, at me. Perhaps you need to stop and ask, do I want to change? Change spiritually. It means growing and maturing in your relationship as a follower of Jesus by being intentional. How do you grow spiritually? We walk with Jesus, and that's easily said. But here's the rub. When did you last open this book, the Bible, and intentionally learn and read more? What about prayer? When did you last intentionally stop and pray and have time set apart with and for God? What about intentionally talking about your faith, your life, your journey with other Christians, other believers, and non-Christians too? And what about saying, truly, Spirit of God, change me? Change is here to stay.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of all.
And so a prayer. Lord, help us in this time of change. Amid uncertainty, amid fear and doubt, help us. Help us as we turn to you for change to be transformed. As we begin to think about our behaviour, we ask that you will help us to think this through your eyes and your grace and your compassion and your love. Help us to process thoughts and desires. Help us to turn to you. Awaken us to your presence and the depth of your love. In times of change, help us not to focus on the changing world around us, the changes within society, the changes within communities, the changes within church life, but help us to change in maturity with you. Amen.